What's up, everybody? Brandon Lilly here with the Be Legendary podcast by Sorinex. I am sitting here with Tim Kennedy, and what a privilege to be sitting here with a guy like you, man. It's just really, really special kind of person that you are. How you doing?
I am feeling free today.
So I saw you had a pretty brutal workout earlier. Is that right?
Yeah, we had Javier Lovato's getting ready for Musasi and for a title fight in Bellator. And I got another buddy, Andrew Craig, who I used to fight with in the UFC. He's looking to fight in May, and so they wanted this old hairy troll to come in and be a sparring partner with them.
Well, I mean, from what I see, it really does look like you have such a dedication to your training and your physical being. I mean, I heard on the Rogan podcast the other day, Kevin Hart was talking about, or Rogan was commenting that Kevin Hart and The Rock were two people that he just didn't understand their pace. You know, and as someone who moves around quite a bit myself, that's one of the things that I look at you and I just don't understand. I mean, you're zigzagging here and there, and every single day is kind of a brutal pushing of the body and in some cases the mind. How do you do that?
Well, at first it's hard,
Right.
but eventually your body just adapts. I look at things like David Goggins does, like running 100 miles, like 20 marathons in a row or whatever insanity he did. And I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. Who would ever do that?
Right.
I look at guys that are in the gym, the NFL football players, they're training next to us, they're pulling like 600-700 pounds off the floor and they're running like 4.40s. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Right. And it's really just what kind of stress you put your body through. And your body will adapt. And my body has adapted to what is my pace, my lifestyle, my regiment, and what I do for a living.
Right.
So, like I want to be in gunfights. I want to be in fistfights. I want to, I want to fisticuff at every opportunity. And I want to run circles. I just want to wear people out in every single sense. And the only way that you can do that is to train. And so that's my approach. I'm going to wear you out.
So you like being in the gunfights, you like being in the fist fights. What is it about that? Is it just a physical testing, like individually, for a greater good? I guess I should say, serving with the military or whatnot, or is it just something deeper than that? I'm just fascinated by your mindset.
I love service. I love being in the military. But if you go back to me being a kid, like 17 years old. I'm applying to be an EMT and a firefighter. I had to wait till my 18th birthday so I could go to the fire academy and start my EMT school. Right. You go before that where I'm a lifeguard. And you go before that, you go back to the very beginning. That's just how life was. A narcotics officer for a father. All of my uncles, my grandparents all served in World War II and Vietnam respectively. So it was just like what you're supposed to do. And there's not toxic masculinity there. This is just what we do. We're protectors. And if there's a bully that's bullying somebody on the school, you crack them in the face and you push them off the second floor, which I did.
Right.
I was kindergarten at North County Christian School when I was 5.
Yeah.
And
so do you feel like it's intrinsic? Like it's not something that you've just developed over experience? You grew up maybe tough or something like that. It's actually just something that's intrinsically built into you, right?
No, it grows.
Yeah.
Now people want to do what they're good at, like if I could hit like a 600-yard drive, I would be beating Tiger and earning another, my 9th green jacket instead of his 5th, but guess what? I can't. What I can do is, like you set my world on fire and you have people screaming and fear and chaos and anarchy. And I'm like, cool, this feels normal to me. So let's go ahead and kick some ass.
I'm sitting here trying to run through 1,000 questions I want to ask you, and it's all kind of boiling down to this. You could be classified as any number of things. If somebody was speaking about you in the military, they could classify you as a ranger. If somebody was speaking to you as an athlete, they could refer to you as a UFC fighter. What do you define yourself as?
So when my teenage daughters have like career work day and I have to walk up in front and be like, "Hi, my name's Tim, and I punch people in the face for a living. And if you're bad, I kill you. I'm a special forces sniper. I'm a ranger. I'm a Green Beret with 24 deployments." No, I don't say any of those things. I usually say that I'm like an entrepreneur,
Right.
or I find something else kind of boring.
Yeah. I would think that it would be, I mean, because even listening to you right there, it's like, man, this guy should have such an ego, and I know that ego plays into part of those things as a defense. I mean, you have to have it, or you wouldn't care enough to pick your hands up and fight, right? But I think every time that I've been around you, which is about three times now, one most recently in Austin when we were at the gun range, which I want to talk about later, but you just have this way about you that I don't look at you as a celebrity, so to say. I don't look at you as someone who throws himself around as like a kiss my ring kind of person. You're really one of the more humble men I've ever been around that has this high profile position, and your graciousness with everyone around you. How do you find that balance? Because for myself, um, I think that's one of the identifying factors within myself when I've been really self analyzing is that I just wanted to be accepted and I wanted to be appreciated. So when I found powerlifting, it was very easy to gravitate towards that success. And then you kind of, or I won't say you did, I lost myself somewhat to that vibe. And, I wanted more of that instead of being like, you know what, I'm who I am. I'm cool with this guy. And I just remained myself. How have you navigated those waters so well?
I haven't. I fail all the time. I humiliate myself all the time. I embarrass myself all the time. I have a close group of friends that let me know and remind me when I have failed.
Right.
And the places that I go and the community that I surround myself with, they're communities and friends that an ego can't exist there. If Matter of fact, like when I walk into the gym, painted on the side of the wall, it says "Leave your ego at the door."
Yep.
When I walk into training this morning, like we consciously do an ego check. Like, everybody good, attitude straight, everybody ready to work. Let's do this.
Right.
When I go and train, whether it's like with Jeff Gonzalez at the range or I'm going up to Early Peak Ranch, to work on long gun stuff with Clayton. Like they're the masters of their trade, and I'm doing what they do, and they do it better than me.
Right.
So I can yet again be humbled. So I can yet again be embarrassed. So I can yet again fail, and that gives me an opportunity for growth.
Right.
You look at kind of the special forces approach to training. Never once, not one time in 15 years, have I had someone say, "Hey man, great job. Hey, that was a great mission. Good job doing ammo forecast. That was a great risk assessment." Not once. It's like, this is what you should do better. And
Right.
and even in our after action reviews where we look at something that we did, it's okay, these are our improves, i.e., this is what we messed up on in these categories, and we're going to fix it. And then the things that we want to continue to do, it's not like a high five, like it's not like great job category, it's sustain. So it's not even, all we're doing is acknowledging that went well, so we're going to continue to do that. And then everything else is about improvement. There's not a single high five, okay, let's go put on some tanning oil, some short shorts, and sit out in the sun. It's like, all right, so that didn't work. We're going to fix that. This did work, so we're going to continue to do that.
Right.
So it's a totally different mindset than from anybody else is used to.
What do you think? Because I think that was a generational mindset of the United States for a long time. From the beginnings to the foundation to, the generations of World War II and the following generations. But I think somewhere in the 70s, 80s, 90s, you started to see this transition of, this kind of coddling. And I'm only reflecting upon the difference that I've seen between, my childhood at school versus my son's childhood at school, and they're two radically different worlds. What do you think the cataclysmic event for society was that kind of brought on this softening? Or do you think it's been more recent than I'm even talking?
Good times. No,
Yeah.
it's been a generational thing. So when we were growing up, we were being raised by people that were accustomed to struggle because their parents survived and were the greatest generation. They survived the biggest depression. They survived fascism. They survived communism. Like the largest economic crash in American history and the rise of real Nazis, not like, let's just throw this word around because we disagree with somebody, but like legitimate, I'm going to start gassing Jews and kill
Right.
people that aren't like me, real fascists. And then the rise of communism, where people in the millions were being murdered because they didn't want to do what the government wanted to do. So
Right.
that was like, that's my grandpa, right? And then my dad was raised, of course, by my grandpa, and then I was raised by the same kind of hardened approach that wrought a lot of success. But
Right.
then we had really good times because now we're two generations removed from struggle, and good times, they breed soft people, and then soft people breed bad times. And if you kind of look at the trajectory of where we're going, um, when we got a generation of soft people, we're going to have some hard times,
Right.
and then hard times will breed hard men and women. Hard men and women will make good times. Good times will make weak men and women, and then there we go again. It's just this circle.
So you just think it's
Um,
just an ongoing circle
yeah,
of just evolution for us. I agree to some level on that as well. I haven't probably thought it out as clearly as you stated. So, when I'm looking at all this as what can I do for my kid? You know what I mean? How can I make him self-aware that his life is much, much better? No fault to my parents, but much, much better than mine. How am I navigating all of this change and evolvement where there's a part of me that just wants to say, kid, I don't care. You got to get tough and you got to pick yourself up and keep going. I don't care about these feelings. But then also as someone who I feel like never had my feelings hurt as a child, I'm trying to kind of understand him a little bit better and do a little bit better for him than I was done for. And I mean,
yeah.
how do you navigate that with your own life? I mean, in your kids.
I mean, I always look at things through a lens of what do they need, not what they want.
Right.
Like you're not supposed to give your kid what you never had. You're supposed to give the kid the wisdom to let him earn what he wants.
Right.
And that's a really hard thing for a parent to do because we hear that we don't want to see our kids struggle. We don't want to see our children suffer. We don't want to see pain. But God, that's where growth comes from. There's
Right.
not an element of human nature that doesn't come back stronger after struggle. Muscle, mind, success, all of it is tied to struggle.
Sure.
And it is the most painful thing to let your child struggle, but you got to do it. Like you sit down and do homework for your kid, you are destining them to fail. You let that kid take that participation trophy and put it on his shelf. You have just acknowledged that being middle of the road or failure is okay.
Right.
And that sounds callous, but to love your kid, you have to love your children. You have to let them shine and succeed and fail and struggle. You have to let them do both.
Do you ever worry about their perspective on you as a parent, not only as their father, but as this kind of public figure that, I mean, you get to do some really, really amazing things. And, I'm assuming that your father probably didn't get the same opportunities that you've had. Do you have any kind of guilt with that? Is that I can remember the first time that I got a paycheck, out of college or whatnot, that I knew was a little bit more money than my dad made. And I felt proud of myself in one way, but then I was also a little bit guilty about it because I know he's outworked me as a man. And then also to my own son, he's asked me things. He's like, "Do you think I could ever, be a champion this or a champion that?" And I don't want him to struggle with it, but I also want him to aspire to greatness. So how do you look at those two situations?
You let them see you fail. You let them see you struggle. My 4-year-old son, he has seen me bleed. He has seen me fail. He has seen me fall. He has seen me crash. He has seen me tap out. He has seen me get back up. He has seen me stand back up. He has seen me turn my bike back over and get back on. He has seen me miss a target, take another wind measurement, do a little bit more math, and then hit the target. He's seen all that.
Right.
And they're smart. Like these kids today, they're so much smarter than we were. And they see everything and they understand everything. So I think a lot of parents, especially in this generation, they want the real life to look like their Instagram page,
Right.
which is the craziest, dumbest, most narcissistic, ethnocentric thing that a human could do, especially in front of their kids. The thing their kids need to see is them fail and then try again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think about, the trajectory of my lifting, and I had a pretty catastrophic injury, and I feel like I beat it to death on this podcast talking about it. But that really was a shift, for my son to see that every man can fall, because I had built myself into a pretty fierce competitor and was winning some and was doing really well. And I felt invincible. I talked to him in a lot of ways in those days as if I was invincible. But it was after the fall that I feel like he really got to see a different side of me, as well as a different side of life, because I was humbled. I was broken down. I had to, have someone help me bathe and walk me here and there. And it was like I could see the change of the way he looked at me. I think we have a responsibility to our kids to show them in so many ways that we can better ourselves. Through those failures, that's where the betterment comes. And I think for my son, that's been one gift that I have with him that I don't feel like I had with my dad. My dad was more of the special forces type. Is that kind of how your father raised you, that kind of toughness? Or is it more of an understanding, loving, compassionate kind of relationship?
It was perfection. Like this sounds so prepared, but I had the perfect father for who I was and the perfect mother for who I wanted to be. And my dad of letting me struggle and letting me fail. My very first wrestling match ever, I got pinned in like 8 seconds. And it was like a double elimination. I'm humiliated, right? And I want to walk out the door. He's like, "Man, that was a rough match, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, so you got about 5 minutes and you're gonna get back out there." I'm like, "I don't want to go back out there." He's like, "Frankly, you don't have a choice. This is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go out there and you're gonna try your hardest."
Right.
And like at the time I was like, "You dick. I don't want to do that. I just lost in front of everybody."
Right.
And and it felt so, and I could see my mom like wanting to run up and hug me and kiss me and be like, "I'm so sorry, honey. I know that was rough." And my dad, who just like, I bet the moment he turned around, he was crying.
Right.
Because he loves me so much and he loved me with everything. But at that moment, he says, "You're going to go back out there and you're going to try your hardest."
Yeah.
And that has carried into every single element of my life. And that's that sweet balance of love and tough.
Right.
And, the military is the same way, where like there's times where you just have to be tough, where you just have to be a badass, where I'm going to run through this wall. I'm going to kill everybody on the inside of this room because they want to hurt my team. And I love my team.
Do you feel like, I'm listening to you speak and you say you run through a wall and kill someone. Like, does that translate very well? Like your mindset, do you find yourself in like micro confrontations at events that you go to? Because you're a pretty public guy, and to have, these conversations with people, I'm sure from all walks of life, all political affiliation, do you find yourself uncomfortable in those situations? Because I would imagine you don't feel uncomfortable because you're just being true to yourself. But I bet you rub some people wrong sometimes, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. One of the hard things is like people never know how to take me. And I think that they think that there's a persona maybe online or on television or in the cage. And truth be told, like there's only one version of me. Like I'm not smart enough. I'm not George Clooney or, he's some brilliant actor that can have these two faces and put on these different personas. Like I'm a hairy, scarred up troll that, that's kind of gifted at violence.
Yeah.
But like loves life. And like you said, when anybody's around me, like all you get is sincere, because I'm just not smart enough to be anything else. So you're like, all you get is one version of me. And I try consciously to be really not to disarm people, but to let them know that, you put me in body armor and you try to negatively affect the American way of life. Interaction is going to go a lot different.
Right.
But if we're at a gym, we're in a cafe or a coffee shop, there's not a thing that you could ever do to make me mad. There's nothing you could say. There's not, like pour drink. I literally had a dude pour beer on my head and spit in my face. And 5 minutes later, he's hanging out with me and my friends, apologizing. And, like.
Do you think it's just because of your perspective? Like, I mean, you've just seen so much bad that you try to be a light. I mean, I know that's kind of a cliche way to put it, but I mean,
100%.
Yeah,
no, totally. That's it. Like the more effective I have become at doing the things that I do, like think about how fast I can pull a trigger now, like how fast I can get a gun out, the sights up and get it on in comparison to, let's say 10 years ago or 15 years ago. But how much harder it is for me to do it and how much more goes through my mind before that decision's made is because I love sincerely, authentically life and people, and I appreciate and I respect, and I see so much horrible, I see so much evil, and I see just like the worst of people that I'm always just seeking, begging and pleading and imploring to find the good in anybody.
What is the worst? What's the worst battle zone you've seen? I think a lot of times, I know you've spent quite a bit of time in Africa, and you've been in the Middle East too. Is the misperception that there's really nothing happening in Africa, right? I mean, I think the public perception as a whole. I mean, I was talking with a lady the other day, and she was just kind of commenting on like, I wish they'd bring these boys home. And I said something to the effect, we've got them all over the world, Africa, the Middle East, elsewhere. She said, I didn't know they're still in Africa. Keep in mind, elderly lady, small town Kentucky. But I do think that is a common, thread line, is that we only know what the media tells us, right? They're not talking about Africa a lot at all. No. I mean, even in regards to the military, but they're not talking about Africa much at all.
Yeah, I mean, the media sucks. They do. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking what happens there. Not to make light of lives that are lost, but if for example a guy walks into a mosque and shoots people, it's headline news, and the whole entire world's talking about it, and an entire country's outlawing semi-automatic weapons.
Right.
That's like a Tuesday in Burkina Faso. Like that happens every single goddamn Tuesday.
Right.
And nobody talks about it. Like the Niger, Mali, Nigeria, Burkina Faso, the Western Sahara, Libya, Somalia, like the things that happen there in your worst nightmare, to my worst enemy, I wouldn't even want them to hear about it, know about it, or see it. And that's like a weekly occurrence there. And we have special operations over the entire continent right now.
Right.
But nobody knows, and nobody cares, and nobody talks about it, because it's just those blacks in Africa, so nobody cares.
Right.
And it kills me.
Yeah. Is that why you have kind of renewed your vigor for the special forces and re-enlisting? And I mean, was it a specific choice of yours to go to Africa, or was it just where you were placed and now you've kind of developed this viewpoint on it, or what?
Like we as a Green Beret, as the Green Berets, as Rangers, as infantrymen in combat arms, we're supposed to do one thing. That's run towards the sound of gunfire, right? So if you simplify that, like turn towards the problem, in wrestling, in boxing, footwork, you always want to face your problem. And, that's That's one step deviation from run towards the sound of gunfire. Let's just simplify it a little bit. Like, let's turn towards the problem. The Middle East, Iraq, and Afghanistan, they are becoming more and more stable. ISIS has been destroyed in Iraq, and I'm not a guy that wants to go to war, to combat, just to hang out. I want to go to where the problem is. I want to turn towards the trouble. I want to turn towards the problem.
Right.
And the problem right now is in Africa. If you're looking at where the breeding ground for extremism and terrorism, and where a lot of the Middle Eastern countries are sending their people to train to then go and do bad, it's a lot, mostly in North Africa.
Well, what's going on down there that's got it? So, I mean, is it just the case that it's always been what it's always been, or is there some kind of financial gain that I just can't see? I mean, how much product are we really exporting out of there? And how, I mean, the diamonds and things of that nature, but I don't know how big of a business that really is. I mean, you see it boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's less about like economic stability, and more about getting ahead of what we know is going to be a problem.
Right.
When we look at the 9/11 terrorists and how they prepared and how they trained, you see this like 18-month trajectory of kind of, they become radicalized. They then begin on this journey, this path to do something bad. And all of these little things have to happen for them to, from that kind of choice, this gradual, lots of little decisions leading up to the final catastrophic event, the crescendo of their extremism. It's like 18 months, sometimes longer, of them taking this journey of destruction. And at times, people were traveling to Afghanistan or Pakistan to get trained, and then they were going to northern Iraq to get trained, and then they were going to, insert some country, Libya or Somalia. Well, now the kind of the radical extremist groups, they can only prey upon the uneducated and the poor.
Right.
Right. Like if you go to a rich white guy in Florida, be like, hey man, do you want to join ISIS? You're like, that's ridiculous. But if you go to a poor village and you talk about stability and you talk about, like somebody's having a wedding and you pay for the wedding, you pay for the wedding dress, and the people see you do it, like you've planted these seeds of doubt about like, wait, are these bad people? Are these Al-Qaeda people? Are they really bad? Or like they're here to help us, and they're talking about morality and ethics and integrity, and then they're paying for my daughter's wedding. Right. Like maybe they are good people. And that's only made possible because they can't see the bigger picture, and they were just being manipulated. And what's happened is there's lots of villages and there's lots of communities and there's lots of countries in Northern Africa that are just, they're ripe for the picking. Right. And they're being manipulated in the sense that they're being taken advantage of course, by assholes.
Well, but there's also the growing, I would say, because the left side of the spectrum versus the right side of the spectrum politically is saying, okay, kind of what you're saying right now about that situation here in the U.S. We only bring in 18-year-olds. We want to catch them when they're young and impressionable and full of hate, and on and on and on. I mean, how do you view it as any different other than the fact that we have a constructed government, we have a constructed constitution that we live by, and it is free choice? But do you still feel that at some level it's the same, or how do you view those two things differently?
Man, I really, so I'm like apolitical.
Right. Well, I mean, you're talking to a person who I've kind of removed myself from the banter that goes back and forth, but I'm just saying the overall sense of what I feel in this country is this. There's no middle ground, or it's definitely a receding middle ground as we're trying to polarize these two sides. And that's one of the things that I heard quite a bit now, in the last couple of years, and even into the upcoming election in 2020. It's this battle cry of these are the young and the impressionables. That's what the right says about the what we want to label as the progressives, and then that's what the left is saying about these proud right-handed or right-sided political minds who are joining the military at 18 years old. It's the same argument, just different sides of the fence. Which do you just think it's the human condition?
Yeah, it's mostly the human condition, and then like the only thing that we're hearing about is these outlier. You said the middle ground, the people, the rational, logical, reasonable people in the middle is this shrinking population. I disagree. I think it's really 1% fringe outliers on respective sides, on the far left and the far right, and that's all we talk about because they do crazy things, and and crazy things is what sells, right?
Right.
The crazy things get headlines. Ocasio-Cortez saying something stupid, or Donald Trump saying something stupid, or Mitch McConnell saying something stupid, and it just goes back and forth. And they're doing it intentionally because they want to be that 1% outlier, because that means that they're in the news, and if they're in the news, that they're winning.
Right.
And then the other 98%, right in the middle, are like, "What the hell is going on here? Have we lost our minds?"
Absolutely.
And I don't like that. If somebody's losing something, they're like, let's just change the rules. Let's change the voting age, or let's change from electoral college, or let's add Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. So it's, hey, we can't win through the normal channels, so let's just change the rules.
Right.
What we just have to do is start focusing and identifying what the issues are that we want to talk about, lose the political correctness, and then talk through them. I mean, that's what political discourse is, and that is a beautiful thing that has been lost in this generation because everyone's so easily offended. I don't need a safe space. I want somebody that's going to disagree with me, because here we are circling back, because guess what, Brandon? Struggle is where growth happens.
Absolutely. And I think it does kind of lend itself to the fact that it's just the way that humans are going to be forever and ever. It's just, I think at some point we have to hope, and like you said, it'll probably come back around with the pendulum swing, that someone rises up, creates a lot of good, and then probably gets a little demonic and, tries to become an emperor of all time or something like that. But I think and that leads me into something else that I wanted to talk to you about. We have this archetype of controller, emperor, leader, and you did a big service to the history of Hitler in a way that brings a lot of truth to the story when there's a lot of mistruths, right? I was so fascinated with your show. It became one of my favorite shows. Like, I love the history aspect of it, and obviously Hitler's a very fascinating character within that. How did you come upon this opportunity, and how invested are you in this still?
So I am very much invested in it. The route of me coming and being part of it was when they were looking for investigators. They needed somebody that had hunted humans. They needed somebody that could speak Spanish, because where they knew these fascists, these Nazis had run, spoke Spanish. And that had contacts in South America, could fly a drone and use ground penetrating radar. So those were things that I could do.
Pretty
and
cool
there weren't a lot of
people.
Yeah. So it was a pretty easy job interview. We're like, can you speak Spanish? Like, yeah, I can speak Spanish. Like, do you know South America? I was like, yeah, I've been deployed there like 7 times.
Yeah.
Well, where have you been? Like, I've lived in Bogota, I've lived in Buenos Aires, I've been to Chile, I've was all through the Caribbean. So it was, and like, can you fly a drone? I was like, yeah, here's the drones I can fly. They're like, do you know ground penetrating radar? I'm like, just when I can find a cave on the Texas border or anywhere in Afghanistan where some asshole's hiding so I can go in and find him.
Right.
Like, oh, this is awkward. And it was cool to be part of that investigation, to show a history that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And that's kind of tragically where we left. At the end of season 3, the direction that the investigation was going to continue to go, the network didn't want to talk about.
Right.
That really, really pointed fingers towards current day problems. And obviously right now, the word fascist and the word Nazi is a hot button topic, because
Right.
the left and the right use it interchangeably for anybody that they disagree with.
Right.
And which is so pathetic and so petty. Like, let's first acknowledge that anybody on either spectrum of the political conversation with a disputed discourse is like, oh, you're a Nazi. You're like, no, you're not. Do you know what? Let's look at what Nazis are.
Right.
And let's not say nationalism is fascism. Let's not say that, like, Let's be very particular about what these things are. And anybody that's seen the difference, if you've seen a swastika tattooed on a dude's neck, like I have, and see the things that they're capable of, that's a very different picture. And that's 2 generations removed from the real Nazis that were gassing Jews.
Right. Oh, well, to interrupt you there for 1 second, I thought really about my own life with the generational thing that you were talking about on the Rogan podcast, where you mentioned, that it may be the next generation, there's a little bit of shame or confusion or what do we do now? But then the second or third generation almost gets this kind of pride in their bloodline and who they were. I thought that nailed it because, I'm looking at myself now as I come into my late 30s, wanting to archive things about my family, wanting to understand things about my family. When I find those things out, I feel more connected to and I'm more proud of them. So I think you brought up something that's really, really poignant in that situation. Is it's like, for some people, yeah, there probably is a sense of shame. There probably is a sense of wanting to tuck away, like the Braun family, not wanting to have their DNA tested or whatnot. But I really think it's interesting that you pinpointed that because it's something I would have never considered as this resurrection of that belief system.
It's a resurrection of it, and it's a new source of identity.
Yep.
And that's the frightening part, where they're of a certain heritage, and they know that some point in their lineage that these ideals, or this philosophy was something that their grandpa was ready to die for. And then their dad, kind of sheltered and protected it. And here you are, the grandson of an SS Nazi, and you are even more viscerally connected to the ideas that your grandfather had, because now that's what your identity is.
Yeah.
And then you're in good times, and good times is a dangerous place for these fertile things, this fertile soil to be grown.
How much of a threat do you think that we're looking at from like a white supremacist standpoint versus, the Middle Eastern threat, or even, opposing terrorism threats from all over the world? I mean, how much of a viable threat is this to the United States, do you feel, from your viewpoint?
Extremism in any form is just that, extremely idiotic.
Right.
And I think it's equally distributed across. I love opening. You can open up like an NPR or CNN or MSNBC or a Rachel Maddow, and it's like 99% of terrorist attacks in the United States are done by white Christian men, right? And then 17 seconds later, you open up NRA or Fox News or any conservative right, Sean Hannity, and they're like 99% of all terrorist acts in the United States are conducted by oh my God, can you please just shut your faces?
Right.
And let's just all agree that it's regardless of what it is, it's terrorism. And we will treat it the same regardless. If it's a person walking into a Christian church to shoot a bunch of people, or a person walking into a mosque to shoot a bunch of people, or some kid trying to get famous and shoot a bunch of kids in a school, I don't care what they are. I don't care what their reasons are. We're going to stop them, and then we're going to identify the causes for each of them, and then we're going to try to root out those respective causes.
I think that's the best way to approach it. Because I think even now we're trying to overclassify everything. Like, oh, you're not just a terrorist anymore. You're a terrorist that belongs to this group. And I think that helps on the investigative side of things. But I think it also allows us to diminish or to deny that some of the stuff that's coming on or going on is from one group or the other. We pay more attention.
They want to label everything because they want that to fit their narrative.
Right.
And so a stereotype, anytime that you're using stereotypes, it's a biased form of profiling. So profiling is using real data and creating a pattern, and that pattern through statistics supports some bit of information. Right. Whereas stereotyping is just lumping things together by bias to support your narrative. And that's all that anybody does now. They're like, the moment that something happens, Everybody's just waiting. Like the NRA is just waiting. Like, please let it be the guy that stopped it be a gun carrying guy, and he's a good guy. And then the other side is like, please let that person have legally bought their firearms so that we can show that we need more gun laws.
Right.
And they're just both sitting there waiting to categorize this. And I'm just sitting here being like, both of you are idiots.
Right.
Let's find out who this jerk is. Let's first end him and make sure that more like him never come to fruition, whatever that takes.
Right. Well, how are you? You brought up the gun laws things, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but how have you navigated that situation? Because I mean, I'm a guy who's talked to you, I'm a guy who's followed you, and I'm a guy who I would like to think that I have reasonable thoughts. I've heard what you said in relation to the gun laws, and I think your explanation of the death by 1,000 cuts is a very good, relative understanding of what's going on. That if you start one gun law, then that enacts a chain reaction. But I don't think that we're at a point to look at the situation and say that we've got it figured out completely, right? I think we're at a point where we have to ask some serious questions, and I think that at least looking at the gun law in effect versus what could be just. You mentioned it best. It can't change just on paper, right? It has to be an effective change. So how did you navigate all that? Like just understanding there's people that are just misunderstanding you. I think that's the best way to put it, because what I thought you said made a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's the most ironic conversation that we can have. So obviously I am a gun owner, a advocate for the Second Amendment. Like, I love all the Constitution, not just the second. Like, I love the first and the second, all the way through to the end.
Right.
And I love them equally, and I think they're all important. But I think that, so when I was on Lance Armstrong's podcast,
right,
and I said that gun laws can be a solution to the shootings that we've been having, and people lost their mind as if I was supporting more legislation for gun control, that gun laws and gun control is a way to stop gun violence. And not once did they ever take into context what had just happened in Florida, or who I am, or who I'm talking to. Right. All of those things, those lenses, put context into the conversation that we're having. And I think any rational person can look at gun laws and be like, should somebody that has recently committed a felony, domestic violence, that has a warrant for their arrest, that has a restraining order for domestic violence, should those people be allowed to buy guns? Right. And I think every rational person is going to be like, no, they probably shouldn't be allowed to buy a gun. Be like, okay, well, what do we call those things? Right. Those are gun laws. Oh, okay. So are those laws a form of gun control? No, they're not. Okay, we can't do that. Let's not do that. Okay, so you're not comfortable with that, because saying gun control in any form or fashion, because now we're just playing with the vernacular of verbiage, which is like an arguing with a 3-year-old. Oh yeah, arguing with my 3-year-old son about how much food he's going to eat on the plate is how it feels like these conversations are with somebody that I agree with. Right. I was like hung and eviscerated by other Second Amendment loving Americans because they just didn't like the way that I phrased the conversation. And it was a conversation with somebody that is 100% a proponent for gun control.
Yeah.
And I was so disappointed with especially conservative pro 2A type people and bloggers and journalists, because they hung me. Yeah. And because
it's that desire for that clickbaity, knee-jerky reaction, right? It's
so pathetic.
It's so easy to pile on someone who takes a stand, and I've even admittedly kind of frustratedly found myself having things that, man, I feel like I got a pretty good perspective on this. I feel like maybe if one person can hear me and look at it a little bit more like this, it's a better understanding. And I think anytime you take a stand and have a public forum to talk to, it opens you up to that type of criticism. But I would hope to think that people wouldn't just join on, they would think. But that's not the way the world works. I mean, some of the most regretful posts I've ever made is when I'm sharing stuff that's kind of close to the heart, because I want people to improve and grow, and people just attack that, They just have
Yeah.
this tear down mentality, like the crabs in the bucket. Somebody's giving us something to latch onto that's worth rising up for, but no, 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 let's bring it down. That's a much, much easier approach.
Yeah. Like this is another example of being humbled and being embarrassed, being frustrated. Like you're like, how do you not have an ego? Like had I had an ego, it I wouldn't have been sad because I was sad. I would have been, I don't know. So I think somebody that has an ego and then they watch what they thought was their own kind of audience and fan base try and hang them. Um, they would have like lashed out.
Right.
Instead, I just wanted more opportunities to have a conversation with all these people and be like, please just listen to what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is rational and what I'm saying is logical. And what I'm saying is in the attempt to preserve life without losing a gun. Like I went to the store today. I just picked up 3 suppressors. Think about that for a second. Yeah. I have 3 suppressors sitting on my desk right next to me, NFA items. I paid my ATF tax. And I have 2 Liberty safes, presidential 40 gun safes in my office as we're talking. And I'm the guy that you're worried about gun control.
Right.
I mean, like,
I think it just has to be, like you said, it has to just be an ongoing conversation where we're really taking checks and balance of the facts, not hyperbole or some kind of distracted politicism. It has to be a real analysis of the facts. And I was my NRA gun-toting supporter, dyed in the wool kind of guy until this one day I was at the gun shop in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm standing there and there's a man just to the right of me that was obviously had some mental handicap and was very, very uneven with his nerves as well, maybe some kind of cerebral palsy or I don't even know if he was drunk even. I mean, it was a very, very odd sway and twitch. He couldn't even hold the gun he was holding. The man that was looking at him was trying to help him steady the pistol. And I'm pretty certain this guy was able to buy a gun right on the spot. And I was just uncomfortable watching it to the point like, do I say something? Is it my place to say something? I don't know. But after that, it's like, what if this guy goes home and not only hurts someone else, but hurts himself? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a cause to question these things, and I think we should be allowed to. That's the freedom of speech. That's the freedom of growth. I mean, you're not going to look at something if you everything in your life about driving a car is good. You're never going to think about the drunk driving or the accidents or the seatbelt malfunctions or any of these things. But if one of those things happens to you, it's easy to become understanding that maybe some change needs to occur. And I don't understand why we have such a problem in this country right now of just coming to the table and putting egos aside and being able to have a discussion about it with fact. I don't know why that's such a problem.
I think it's out of insecurity, and I think it's also about people not really understanding or want to delve into the issues because of those insecurities. If your response to anything Second Amendment oriented is "shall not be infringed upon," and you're not willing to really dive into the information about gun violence, and talk about what's really happening in Chicago and the causes, and that there's elements of oppression with the African American community and how much struggle there is there, then there's never going to be an opportunity for growth, and there's never going to be an opportunity for true discourse because you're not humble enough to take that step of faith to try and understand something that you don't right now. And that goes back to the ego and back to the humility of, I'm truly scared. Some of my friends that have died, some of my friends that have been blown up, like they were so good, right? Yeah. They were so good. Like, I'm not going to make a mistake. And through that ego, me fighting, I'm the fights that I lost, they were always because of me thinking I can't be beaten.
Right.
And that scares me. That scares me that I always want to be able to sit down with somebody and be like, Lance, tell me and explain to me your perspective. Like, I need to understand why you feel this way.
Right.
And I may not agree with it, but man, I hope there's enough information in there that will empower me to maybe help me define my own opinions.
How well do you think you self-analyze and self-understand yourself? I think a lot of guys struggle with that self-identity, especially again in a situation where you've got a lot of really, and I hate this term, but it's accurate, alpha male type life. Your special forces, your UFC fighter, your jiu-jitsu, you're all of these highly active things, highly macho things. And a lot of times guys have a hard time being real with themselves in those situations for exactly what you said. It's hard to go in a ring thinking, man, I've got a 50% chance of losing this fight. It's very hard to do that. So how do you truly understand yourself at the real level of exactly who you are versus this persona that you kind of embody, but also have to become in those situations? Like, I think you detach pretty well. How have you gotten to that point that you can be this other guy and then turn it on when it counts?
I mean, imperfectly for sure. I have, look at my fight record. I've lost.
Right.
Look at my trips overseas. I had friends that got hurt. So I failed there too. Look at me as in academics, in business. I failed there. And but I got back up and I tried again.
Right.
That's I don't think you can ever have a really accurate perception of yourself. One of the best tools that I have is a circle of friends and family that I can bounce everything about me off of.
Right.
Or I can pick up the phone and I can call Shane, or I can pick up the phone and I can call my dad or my brother or my brother-in-law. And, they will give me the truth as clearly and as honestly as they see it. And it will hurt oftentimes. And that really shapes, for me, how I view myself is how my friends and my family view me.
Right. Oh, for sure. And I mean, I wrestle with the idea of the self-made moniker. I think that there was a portion of my life where I wanted to be self-made. I wanted to carve myself out of whatever this existence is. But that made me a very calloused asshole, detached from a lot of friends and family that loved me very much. And only by coming back into that circle and asking for the right forgiveness and showing over time that, these apologies are genuine, these feelings that I have are genuine, did I start to feel whole again. And I think for me, that tribe aspect has really it's been vital. For so much of my life, I wanted to be this heroing or harrowing type individual, but it just wasn't meant to be that I did it for so long. I got like my 5.5 minutes of fame in the sport of powerlifting, which is a small niche, but it felt really good, but nothing feels good as that balance.
No, I mean, everything about who I am as a person and the most rewarding aspects of my life truly come from that circle and the way that I either provide for them or the way that they view me.
Yeah.
That's all that matters to me.
So is your family, I mean, as crazy and hectic as your schedule is, how do you juggle that? How do you be dad and husband and father? And, how do you go about all this and protecting it and also respecting it? Because sometimes when you come home, all you want to do is just sit down and crash, right? But I think, you have an obligation to them as well. So how do you find that?
Imperfectly.
Yeah.
And they know it's imperfect, and they know that I know that it's imperfect, and they know that I want it to be better. So I get up and I train this morning with some killers, a couple of amazing black belts, UFC fighter, Bellator, about to be world champion. And as soon as I got done with that, I drove and met my wife for coffee at Veracruz Coffee, and we got some Al Pastor. I grabbed my 4-year-old son, went to the park, Talleyrand Park, and we hung out there for a bit, and rock climbed, played on the swings, went and picked up my suppressors from Capital Armory, and then came back here to hop on the phone.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time because that's a full day just without this. So I appreciate it. how often are you shooting now? I mean, like you talk about trying to push the envelope, but also find that balance. I shot with you. I was very very um, humbled by that experience to just watch the repetition of what I would consider, just very simple basics. You were just shooting at the different color targets, like yellow circle, green triangle, and all these things just to get your mind warmed up and ready. And the methodology of the way that you went about it was just awesome to see from someone who really noticed a big problem within myself. When I got better at the sport, I started skipping steps. So when I see someone who becomes a, kind of a master of their craft and dedicates to those basics over and over and over again, it was really impressive. I mean, is that an everyday thing for you?
It's 4 days a week.
Okay.
Um, and just like all things powerlifting, anything in athletics, you have to have these measurable ways to view growth. And for shooting, it gets really easy because it's accuracy and speed. Like those are the two most important things. Is how fast can you be and how fast can you be accurate. And the only way that those two things can coexist is through perfect repetition. And you have to do every single one of the steps flawlessly if you want to get faster and more accurate. Like you can get faster. Anybody can be faster. You just work on being fast.
Right.
And you can get accurate. And you just take as much time as you want. But in my world, where you have to be fast and accurate, you have two very clear ways to measure success. And then I know everything that I need to get from point A to point B. And again, there's that struggle because it ain't easy.
No, for sure. Well, listen, I want to give you just a couple more questions because I told you I'd keep you for 60 minutes, and I really do appreciate, and I hope you know how much I respect your life and the way that you live it. So I know you're just super, super intelligent and really fascinated and curious, and that's probably one of the things that I admire most about people that are successful is their curiosity. What are you really focused on right now, outside of all this world where you kind of center yourself maybe in the bedroom at night or in your office to just be excited about, dig through YouTube videos or text or whatever it may be?
Right now, I'm geeking out on judo.
Okay, cool.
Judo and accuracy in shooting. It's something that I've always been fast. A sub 1 second out of the holster. You get me on a firing line at 3, 5, 10 meters and crushing it. What I'm trying to do is push back to 25 meters and still be able to maintain that same level of accuracy. So that struggle is great.
Uh-huh.
Judo has been the more recent. So obviously as a wrestler and a jiu-jitsu practitioner and a fighter, a lot of my style is blending all of these kind of different forms of martial arts together. I'm just really geeking out on sci-fi,
Yep.
Fantasy, and judo.
Sweet. I really do. I'm kind of, different things. I look at a lot of different stuff all the time, and sci-fi tends to be one of them that's really kind of interesting me. So are you a Star Trek or a Star Wars guy?
I was a Star Wars. The last Star Wars really pissed me off. But I love the entire genre of sci-fi.
So do I. I think it's really cool.
So I like choosing between Star Trek and I will cry every time Spock dies to save the Enterprise and Captain Kirk.
Absolutely.
And then you fast forward a bunch of years, and Captain Kirk sacrifices himself to save the Enterprise, and Spock goes down to get Khan. You're just like, oh my God, I'm crying again. Why am I crying?
All right, sweet. Last question. For anybody out there that's listening to this, that's just maybe listening to you as a person that they admire or whatever, if somebody's wanting to just better themselves, what's your daily recipe of how to go about a positive attitude and a positive thought press towards kind of changing the direction of your life? Big question, quick answer is fine.
I think ditching the ego,
Yep.
accepting failure, and hoping for struggle. That sounds weird to say hope for struggle. I don't want anything to be easy.
Right.
I had a pretty fun workout plan this morning. I was going to be training with Juan and Shane, doing a bunch of 30-second on, 30-second off, sprint sets on an Airdyne skier and a rower. I was like, this is going to be super fun.
Yep.
And then Lovato calls and he's like, hey, man, I'm in town. I'm getting ready for this Musasi fight. I need to do a bunch of MMA rounds. Can you come in? I'm like, do I want to come in and fight with one of the best grapplers on the planet who's getting ready for his title fight against Gegard Mousasi in Bellator? I'm like, hell yeah, tell me what time, and I'm there. Because I am searching and seeking and begging for that struggle.
Right. That's awesome, man. And I really do think that's a perfect place to end it. And I think you must have a timer there because that was 1 hour exactly. So, dude, I really want to thank you. I mean, I hate to say dude, Tim. I do want to thank you for coming on here and giving me this time because I know how busy you are, and I also know how important it is for you to share your story and your message. So, for the Be Legendary podcast, this is Brandon Lilly. Thank you very much, Tim Kennedy, for joining us, and I hope you all the best, man.
Awesome. America.
Hell yeah. Thanks a lot.